Well, I'm joined now by Sri Lanka's ambassador to Turkey, Pakeer, Mohideen, Amza. Ambassador Amza, thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Sometimes in the news, amid all of the analysis and following the aftermath, we forget our hearts, I think. And so just from the outset, sincerest condolences to you and your country after this horrendous attack. Now, when we look at the actual actions of those people.
Thank you very much.
7 suicide bombers, unbelievable level of coordination. Is your government absolutely sure that this group, National Tawheed Jamaat, are the ones behind it?
I first of all would like to express my strongest condemnation of this heinous terrorist attack in multiple locations, as you said, in my country, in which 290 people have so far been killed and 500 people have been injured. These figures include the foreign nationals as well. I also want to extend my sincere appreciation for the people of Turkey and the government of Turkey, the amount of solidarity that they have expressed yesterday and today. And also I want to take this opportunity to express my sincere condolences to the 2 Turkish nationals who have been killed in these attacks. And coming back to your question, Imran, we have initiated the investigation. So far, we have arrested 24 suspects. And today, the President of Sri Lanka has established a 3-member special investigation committee headed by the Supreme Court and including the former IGP and the former Secretary of the Ministry of Law and Order to look into the causes and the background of yesterday's catastrophic events.
So when we look at the timeline of warnings, we see that the health minister revealing that parts of the government were warned on April the 4th of a potential attack. On April the 11th, a top Sri Lankan police official issued an advisory of potential suicide attacks on churches, and they even named National Tawheed Jamaat that they were planning attacks. And we see through an AP report that came out today that because of the political dysfunction, the Prime Minister and Cabinet were kept in the dark about intelligence related to a potential attack, the Prime Minister not allowed into Security Council meetings and so on for the past half a year. So it leads us to the question, if your leadership wasn't bickering and your leadership wasn't broken, could you have prevented this horrible set of atrocities that happened on Easter Sunday?
Imran, let's see what this investigation committee is going to come out, because this the committee has been given 2 weeks' time to come out with their reports, and we should nothing but fair to give them an opportunity for them to go through and come back. As I said earlier, the background of it, if there's any negligence from our side, they will be able to come out. I think it's nothing but fair for us to give them an opportunity for them to come out with their findings.
As a representative of the government, for those Sri Lankan Christians who feel that they are not protected enough, what is your message to them?
We are a resilient society. You know, we have gone through this difficult time for last 26 years, and we were able to defeat one of the ruthless terrorist organization 10 years ago. And we as Sri Lankans, we belong to a multicultural society. We, the majority, the minority, and this have given an opportunity for us to, join together and work together against the terrorism, regardless of who are the perpetrators, where the sources or the ideology. So this has given an opportunity, and I'm sure we will be able to come out of this crisis situation, and we should be able to live once again as Sri Lankans in a fair and inclusive society, definitely.
Ambassador Pakeer, Mohideen, Amza, I thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Let's bring in our panel now. Shamara Wettimuny researches Sri Lanka's ethnic and religious violence with Oxford University and Verite Research, a think tank which advises governments. And businessman Mohammed Hisham is a former director of Sri Lanka's Halal Accreditation Council. I thank you both for joining us on the Newsmakers. Shamara, you heard me talk to the ambassador, Sri Lanka's ambassador to Turkey. I asked him if, after everything we've heard over the past 24 hours, if it's possible that this could have been prevented, given that there was so much forewarning and that the government is so dysfunctional. Could that have played a part in the fact that there was just so much disorganization and so much dysfunctionality that they could have prevented this atrocity and they did not?
I think it would be too speculative of me to comment on that, but it is emerging to us that there is clearly a lack of communication between different arms of the government, and if it is the case, then there has been a lapse, and they should be held accountable for this. The government, however, I would say, is also guilty of enabling a culture of impunity of violence against religious minorities to continue.
Tell me why and how. Expand on that a bit.
Sure. So Sri Lanka has a long and continuing history of violence against religious minorities, both from the Christian community as well as the Muslim community. And we have not seen enough justice or accountability for those victims. This is not a new phenomenon. This dates back many decades. I would like to say, however, that in the history of violence against Christians, Muslims have not featured as perpetrators. In fact, as a historian, I can tell you that we have not seen Muslim-Christian violence for over 100 years. The last disturbance of any significant scale was actually in the 1890s. So what we saw yesterday is actually a new and deeply disturbing departure from existing patterns of religious violence.
Mohammed Hisham, the government is quite certain that it was National Tawheed Jamaat. I'd not heard of this group before. A lot of people had not heard of this group before. Tell me a bit about them. Tell me how likely it is that this might be them, and what's their deal? What's their grievance? Why are they so angry and why are they so violent?
To be honest, neither have I heard about such a group. Of course, people mentioned the different Jamaats and all, but National Tawheed Jamaat is something which is not something I'm familiar with either. So that's part of the puzzle as well. Hitherto unknown organization, which is supposed to have been coming up in some intelligence briefs a couple of weeks ago, and nobody took notice of it apparently for whatever reasons. And the so-called, if it were true, which is the so-called leaked intelligence memos, which refers to this particular organization, though there is no official statement from Sri Lankan government yet identifying as to who, or nobody has claimed it. So this particular leaked memo even suggests certain names, the locations they live there, what time they come into the house and go out, and all these things are available in that leaked, so-called leaked memo. So we are all also, as much as, I mean, first and foremost, let me tell you that everybody, I mean, everybody is shocked, and even though it's done predominantly targeting the Christian community or the Catholic community, I think it's a sad day for all of us Sri Lankans. And also the victims have been also primarily the Catholics, but there has been Muslims, there has been Hindus and Buddhists. So coming back to this particular point you asked, so with having all this information available in black and white a couple of weeks ago, and even the Prime Minister acknowledging that they had the information, but he had no idea why it was not acted upon. It's quite a puzzle as to a small organization if they were the ones being able to organize something with such a precision and such level and such devastation. And I mean, it's all a puzzle.
Yeah, extraordinary levels of coordination. Shamara, when we see an attack like this that specifically targets Christians on Easter and hotels where there might be foreigners and so on, and we hear words like Tawheed, Jamaat, we think Daesh, we think ISIS, we think Al-Qaeda, we think global jihad, right? Might it be a combination of external factors and inspiration plus local grievances, or is it too early to tell?
I would say it's too early to conclusively say. However, there are two sides to this. For one, the coordination and the scope of this attack is something that we have never seen. It's really unprecedented. The geographical scope across 3 provinces, in hotels, this kind of coordinated attack requires organization and logistical capacity that I'm not sure groups within Sri Lanka could have managed on their own. However, you know, you mentioned Daesh, Al-Qaeda. Typically, these groups tend to claim attacks that they don't even have any connection with, and no such group has claimed it as yet. However, despite these two rather different points, I do think that there must be some level of external involvement to pull off something like this.
Yeah, Mohammed Hisham, are you afraid now? A year ago, or slightly less than a year ago, state of emergency, trouble on the streets, anti-Muslim riots, there was a lot of trouble, right? Is this possibly going to flare up issues between different communities?
It definitely seems to be like, I mean, I assume that most of the Sri Lankans do understand the fact that it has nothing to do with the Muslim community as such, although certain elements within communities may try to provoke into unwanted tensions and clashes. So far, I mean, we haven't had anything as unfortunate as March last year. But I am not scared, but I think my worry and the concern is that how come such a, just like Shamara said, like, I mean, it's very difficult for us to, first thing, we are in total disbelief as to such a organization, so-called organization, if that is true, was able to pull out an attack of this magnitude without any kind of support or any coordination from somebody we don't know. And the second part of it is also, it's so tricky, it's so interesting that it just happens when there is apparently an intelligence memo there. And today there was a press conference by Sri Lankan Muslim community leaders, and they did produce proof, and they showed how much of efforts they have made by giving all the law enforcement authorities months and months ago. They have produced a lot of documentation, given them and told them there are certain elements who are trying to provoke extremism within the Muslim community. Why don't you take actions? And it was just kept aside. I mean, this the biggest concern. I mean, it's more than being scared. The community and also most of the like-minded people, right-thinking people, are concerned as to whether somebody, I don't know, I'm not speculating, but whether somebody just thought of just having a blind eye on everything for whatever reasons. I'm not just saying that, but it's a fair assumption.
Okay, so you're assuming that perhaps some are turning a blind eye. Shamara, something that we grappled with this morning, we had a member of Bodu Bala Sena agree to come on the show. I felt this is not the right time. I felt that we don't have a lot of information. For those who don't know, that I would, and correct me if I'm wrong, Buddhist nationalists, Sinhalese nationalists, very hard line, tend to blame Muslims for a lot of the problems of Sri Lanka. I said I don't think this should be the platform for them at this particular time. Did I make the right decision or not?
I absolutely think you did. Bodu Bala Sena has been involved, or allegedly closely involved, with previous anti-Muslim attacks in Sri Lanka back in March 2018, but also June 2014 in Alutkama. I don't think that it is right, particularly now, for people with extremist views on extremist Sinhala nationalist views to come out and conflate the Muslim community with a few violent criminals who have perpetrated these horrible attacks yesterday. It is very important for us to maintain a difference between the Muslim community, which is a largely peaceful community, with the actions of these people. We, in fact, if you look at some social media pages of ultra-nationalist groups, there's a lot of hate speech going around, blanket targeting Muslims. That kind of speech is not helpful at the moment, and in fact it would play into the arms of whoever organized this. Reprisal attacks is exactly what whoever organized this wants, and that's what we have to avoid. We have to end this cycle of violence now.
Mohammed Hisham, what do you want from the leadership now?
I think it's first and foremost is to take ownership and proper leadership, because I mean, the Muslim community of Sri Lanka has been there for more than 12 centuries in Sri Lanka, and during the civil war and every single point they have been seen as part of the Sri Lankan fabric. And to date, it's the same feeling the community feels, and as much as that's what the community does. But like you mentioned, Imran, a little while ago, certain elements have been trying to create that Islamophobic vision in Sri Lanka as well. And this kind of incident, very unfortunate, very tragic terrorist act, gives them enough ammunition to say that as if that whatever they claimed was true. So what I want the leadership to do is be responsible. I mean, the community leaders have been very clearly, consistently telling the leadership that law enforcement authorities, there are elements which are radicalizing, please take action. It was never taken seriously, and suddenly such a precision strike happens across the country, and the whole blame is put on the Muslim community, as if everybody is a terrorist, which is very unfair. And we feel more than Muslim community, we feel that as part of Sri Lankans, almost 300 Sri Lankan lives have been lost, and we are all equally shocked and dismayed as much as everybody else is, and it's not fair, it's not reasonable.
Right. And the whole world is talking about this now. There's a media frenzy. I can assure you, we tried very hard to get a specific member of the Catholic community, the Sri Lankan Catholic community, to appear on the program and to talk about the experience. It was very difficult, and I can imagine a lot of people are just not in the mood to talk right now. Almost 300 people killed, more than 500 injured in those horrendous, very well coordinated attacks, which included multiple suicide bombings. Once again, our commiserations and condolences to the people of Sri Lanka. I'm out of time, I have to move on, but Mohammed Hisham and Shamara Wettimuny, I thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers.